Energon readings detected on the Neatley Parkway.
Currently tracking 3 black Suburbans.
The Dreads are by far some of the coolest Decepticons to ever appear in the Transformers movies. I mean, 3 distinct scary-looking Decepticons all transforming into identical Chevy Suburbans? It memorized my 8-year-old brain. And while it was sad to see Hatchet get decapitated by a car, Crowbar getting his head blown apart by Sideswipe's shotgun, and Crankcase exploding after Ironhide slammed his grenade into his face, the Dreads ultimately served their purpose, to look cool and menacing during the high-speed highway chase sequence. And so with the Dreads dead, it would make sense that we would never see their beautifully modified 2007 Chevrolet Suburbans ever again. However, that all changed during the production of Transformers Age of Extinction, since when director Michael Bay and the team were filming in Chicago, we would see the alternate mode for one of the Dreads chilling alongside Galvatron and Stinger. And we would see more photos of the Suburban hanging out with Hound and being loaded up onto a trailer. Based on these photos, the Suburban had to be a Transformer, and so a lot of fans at the time wondered if one of the Dreads that we saw in Dark of the Moon was going to make a return in Age of Extinction, or if the Suburban was meant to be a brand new 4th Dread that we never saw before. However, if it was meant to be the former, the common consensus at the time was that the Suburban was likely going to be Crankcase, since unlike in the case of Hatchet and Crowbar, Crankcase's death was never confirmed on screen. However, when the film finally came out in theaters on June 27, 2014, none of the Dreads returned. And as for the Chevy Suburban seen on set, it was only briefly seen in 2 shots, one being this quick shot of Stinger overtaking Galvatron, and you can just barely see the Suburban in the background behind the Decepticon leader. However, in the shot before this, we can see the Suburban clear as day next to Galvatron and Stinger. However, after these 2 shots, the Suburban was never seen again, which begs the question, why did the filmmakers take the time and effort to include it in the film? Well, here's my theory. I believe that the Suburban was never meant to be a Transformer, and this can be backed up by the scene in the film where KSI is monitoring Galvatron and Stinger intercepting the Autobots. On the satellite tracking footage of the highway, which is ironically enough the same footage used in Dark of the Moon when Nest was tracking the Dreads, we can see that KSI has a lock on the Autobots, as well as Galvatron and Stinger. Each Transformer is clearly highlighted as a target. However, the Suburban has no tracking lock on it, even though it's in close proximity to Galvatron and Stinger. This omission is no accident. If the Suburban was meant to be a Transformer, KSI would have registered it. And so its lack of identification on the tracking system means that the Suburban is unfortunately just a regular vehicle. So then, if the Suburban is just an ordinary vehicle, what purpose does it serve in the context of the film? And well, based on everything that we see, my theory is that the Suburban was meant to be a surveillance vehicle, with its main function being to collect data on Galvatron and Stinger. And the reason why I believe this is because Joshua Joyce, the CEO of KSI, mentioned to Harold Attinger that they only tested Galvatron and Stinger at labs and military bases, but not on civilian streets. And so, based on this line, I theorize that the reason why the Suburban was with Galvatron and Stinger in this scene was because KSI was collecting data on how the two would behave on civilian streets. And this can be further backed up due to the fact that in this shot where we see this KSI operator monitoring Galvatron and Stinger, we can see a secondary screen, and on it we can see this guardrail. Now, the reason why this guardrail is significant is because the Suburban is next to the guardrail in both of the shots that it appears in, meaning that it must have some sort of camera on it that KSI can view, thus further proving the theory that the Suburban was meant to be some type of surveillance vehicle to monitor Galvatron and Stinger. As for why we don't see the Suburban again after this shot, this can be easily chalked up to KSI pulling it back after they transformed Galvatron. Now, the last thing I want to cover is why the filmmakers decided to use the alternate mode of the Dreads for the KSI surveillance vehicle. And while we don't have an official answer to this, my best guess is that the Suburban that the Dreads transformed into looked generic enough to be repurposed. And so with that said, now you know that the vehicle that you saw in these 2 short scenes was not meant to be any of the Dreads, but was merely just a surveillance vehicle.